All right, greetings everybody. I think I've worked out the bugs with this thing. I'm going to monitor myself on my phone. That way I don't have echoes. And I think we solved the problem. I'm going to give it a moment to see if it echoes back at me. And if it does, I'm so sorry. I think that was the problem. My broadcasting software uses system audio. And when you have a web browser, I hear something. I hear something in my headphones. Where'd my audio go? We just buffered. Okay. My cell phone's buffering. All right, I switched my cell phone over to cell data. The networks here are crazy. So jam-packed with interference and so many people using Wi-Fi. I actually have to use wired Ethernet up here when I live stream just to get a clear signal. And my cell phone was using the Wi-Fi as well, which I'm monitoring on, which also having problems. So I had to turn that off and just use the regular cell tower data feed. So you get everybody out of the way and nobody stepping on anybody's toes, and we can begin. All right, I'll be back in just a moment. Greetings, everybody. My name is David Hurley. I am your host this evening on this live stream. And as you can tell from the title of this video, it is a book excerpt from Chapter 7 of Love Letters to the Postman. My brand new book just came out last month, available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And I thank you for showing up and watching this little cozy Sunday evening reading little story. And I'm going to be reading Chapter 7. Not all of it, because most of the chapters are fairly long. But if you have a copy of the book, it'll be page 109 to about 125, no, 128. So Chapter 7 goes a little further than that. But I need to keep this on my head. Actually, no, I don't need it. I don't need it. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to act in faith. I'm going to turn this thing off. So I don't want to kill my data plan, and I know it's working now. So, just a few announcements. My website is epiclampladders.com. And the Epic Lamp Ladders came from a dream that I had a couple years ago that basically highlighted to me what my life purpose was. It's given me a huge hint. And it got incorporated into this book. They are an organization that was conceptualized in this book, and they are covered in the last chapter, if you are curious who the epic lamplighters are. Yeah, page 423, there's a chapter called We Are Born of the Epic Lamplighters. If you go to the website, you can kind of get an idea of the mission statement on the real-world implementation of a work in progress. Anyway, to get down to the point, there is a book launch party coming out October 24th at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. On the Epic Lamplighters website, I will be posting the links to the Eventbrite sign up. And everybody's invited to join us for the party. It'll be very fun. There's going to be artist discussion, Q&A, book excerpt reading, prizes, live music, and of course, your host, Fred Garvin. No. I will get into the book now. Get yourself a little, favorite beverage or popcorn. We're going to go for about a half an hour. And maybe a little bit more than that, maybe about 35 minutes. I tried this a few times earlier today, and I kept having these technical difficulties with echoes, and it completely ruined the video after a complete read-through, and I didn't know it until the end, and I was so frustrated. I just had to figure out what I was doing wrong and remember what I did the last time this happened. And I think I got it working now. So we're going to, let me give you some backstory. For those of you that have no clue who I am or who this book is, which is pretty much the entire planet. It is a steampunk fiction written by yours truly. It takes place in 1886, New Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. The Civil War lasted about 20 years and decimated the country and destroyed the vast majority of every major city in the U.S. And it ended early, I think, let's see, 20 years, by the end, like 1879, 1878, I forget the exact year. At the end of the 1870s, it lasted basically 20 years. And they spent the last several years prior to this story rebuilding the country. And it created this new kind of economy in the whole country, kind of like the Wild West, but a steampunk version of it, where everybody's freelance, kind of runs around, entrepreneurial, kind of doing their thing, but there's still the central government kind of thing that came up from the ashes, kind of a common law, constitutional thing, and the large cities are out there doing their rebuilding, and unfortunately corruption didn't go away, and that's where the story really begins to take place, where we take Mark McCloud. He's the main character. He's a inventor, musician kind of guy, and he is going through a divorce, or went through a divorce, and he is trying to find himself and find his light and figure out his place in everything. Comes across some beings, some angelic beings that are helping him in the background and others, and he's allied himself with the good guys, and they're called the Steam Angels. And we're going to be joining them in a moment in their first meeting. The bad guys are called the Power Wolves. They are run by some very nasty guys who are trying to have their own agenda of taking over the country and doing lots of mean things to everybody. So my first version, my first talk, was better. Now I'm kind of winging it because I've already gone through the whole thing once. Chapter 7, Divine Alchemy. Katie and Elroy were having a discussion in Mark's apartment the next day. He was glad to host them for a change and needed the company. She had the newspaper article out and was sharing some highlights. These Powerwolf guys are messing with the juice tech, Elroy said matter-of-factly. I think it was them because of the big explosion a couple weeks ago. I saw a couple of them lurking around, surveying the damage. We don't have much evidence beyond what we scavenged from the incident site. Katie wondered whether there was a bigger picture going on. That was always her specialty. What about those other gangs that are messing with the juice tech also? Oh, you mean the Steam Junkies or the Brass Devils? No. Well then, who do you mean? Or what do you mean? Elroy asked. I mean, there's a bigger picture here that we're not seeing, like it's organized or something. I don't know. What do you think, Mark? Mark looked up from reading a newspaper article. Well, it says here that these power wolves have formally claimed responsibility for this incident. So let's assume they're telling the truth. They're making some announcement to the world that they have this power and they're not afraid to use it to achieve their agenda. I don't think the other gangs mentioned have that capability yet. Sure, they're messing with juice tech, but I don't think they're this far along. It takes major connections to make this happen. We just don't have enough evidence to prove anything either way. We just know how hard it is to accomplish this with what we know and the resources we have available. We need to talk to one of the lab guys. They have a better grasp of the technology and the science behind all this, and how hard it is to weaponize it, Mark continued. Personally, I don't want to get involved with any of this nonsense. I just want to tinker in the lab with this gun thing that I'm messing around with, and stay out of all the drama and politics, Mark proclaimed with a look of disgust on his face. Let the police handle all this. Why do we have to get involved? I got plenty of other things I'd rather do than chase bad guys. Elroy and Katie looked at each other in a rather exasperated way. Mark noticed the two of them making subtle but perceivable facial expressions, almost as if they were communicating visually. He thought that was unusual. After about several seconds of an awkward pause, Elroy looked at Mark and said something that surprised everybody in the room. Mark, you have to get involved with this. You're the only one smart enough and uniquely qualified enough to figure out what's going on. The police aren't going to figure this out on their own, and you know it. We all know it. All they're good for is cleaning up after the bad guys who made the mess and filing all the proper paperwork. He paused for a moment, waiting for a reaction from Mark. Elroy's expression was confident, albeit hopeful, that Mark would want to get involved. Then he continued. Investigations in this town are bought and paid for by special interests, mafia, and nepotism. The fact that it took them almost an entire week just to announce anything in the papers is very suspect. The investigation is going so slowly, the only explanation can be that it's deliberate. There's some kind of conspiracy going on at a high level within the city. What's the body count up to now? Well, according to the article here, over the past 2 months, 1,400 people have been wounded, and another 608 dead or missing, Mark responded. Well, that sounds like 2008 reasons all of us need to be involved. Mark thought to himself for a moment, and started shaking his head. He wondered whether what they said was true. His gut told him it was. His brain said the same because his experience in the city the past 2 years. The police force manning and training have been lagging when it came to large-scale incidents, he said to the others. A fast-moving criminal enterprise or organized group could easily outmaneuver them. That's on a good day, without bureaucracy slowing things down already. So the chances of this crime being solved in a correct or timely manner seem to be low. But why? Elroy asked. It's not my problem. I don't need to get involved. I can't just quit my job to solve this mystery. Let the cops figure it out, Mark responded. Mark's thoughts kept meandering away from this and back to solving his more present issues, like his kids or Deidre. Maybe this little blossoming investigation that seemed to be progressing in the shop was where he needed to focus. Outside, the sound of gunshots erupted, almost as if on cue. All 3 of the rounds struck the building outside, near Mark's second-floor apartment. Everyone ran to the window to see what was going on. More bullets started whizzing by, striking the walls around them. Luckily, they all ducked and weren't injured. One bullet made it into the apartment and found a target. On an ordinary day, a wooden bookshelf would be a safe place to store one's belongings. Unfortunately, today was not such a day. And Mr. Snuggles took a fatal wound to the chest. Mr. Snuggles was the teddy bear that belonged to Mark's younger child. Mark and the kids used to play with it when they were a lot younger, and Mark had taken it with him as a memento when he got divorced. Now all that remained of the stuffed bear was a shredded pile of stuffing and cloth. It took a few moments to register in Mark's brain after the shooting sounds died off. Some gang warfare was going on down below, and from what Mark was able to see, somebody was shooting at the power wolves. Mr. Snuggles had been killed in the crossfire. Mark never thought a teddy bear would evoke such emotion in a grown man. Painful tears rolled up from his eyes as yet another good memory was stabbed in his heart. Something inside him snapped, but he wouldn't realize it until much later. The following day, the police were taking reports from the witnesses and gathering evidence like they usually do. At least they had sent 2 people to investigate. It took them only 1 day to see if somebody died. Luckily this time, nobody who lived in Mark's building had been hurt, but there were bloodstains in the street. Onlookers had dissipated, as the crime scene was already contaminated. Jared looked out the window from his shop to see the police down the street several blocks away investigating whatever was left of the crime scene. That looks like it was near Mark's place, he said out loud. He silently wondered if any of these new cops really understood what was going on locally. He stayed away from interacting with them directly, but he overheard their conversations on many occasions. They didn't seem to grasp the word on the street. They had the mechanical ability to process the evidence and the procedures down pat. It was the intangibles, such as where somebody went to find out about explosives, or which particular parties were involved with certain types of crime that they were struggling with. In other words, actually investigating. That kind of knowledge came from experience and knowing one's town. Too many of these cops nowadays seem to be too new to move through the procedural things and then get to the root cause. Some detectives were worth a darn, he had to admit. But New Philadelphia was a large city and it was getting bigger. They were short on manpower and experience. The criminal element in this town knew it and took advantage of the situation constantly. This is why groups such as the Steam Angels came about. There would be a Steam Angels meeting that evening, and Jared was in charge of the planning committee. They were hoping for a good turnout, as they had a decent agenda planned. Plus, there was some good intel to be released from recent findings and the word on the street. It was also time to bring Mark into the fold. At 6 o'clock, people started shuffling into Jared's garage. It was a detached garage in a small, humble backyard, but was large enough to hold small meetings. He had another woodshed that he used for his other personal exploits, so this fit the bill for now. Mark, Elroy, and Katie all arrived in a group. Elroy was talking to Mark about what to expect. Look, I said this was a standard meeting. We usually talk about current events, the word on the street, or plans and projects. Sometimes people give speeches, and others try to convince the group to do something or not. Frequently, though, the meetings don't go anywhere. You can decide for yourself. Recent events have garnered more interest in our group, and others like it. The police presence in this town is inadequate, and everybody in attendance in this is in agreement on this. So just watch and listen, and maybe you'll have something to contribute. Mark nodded and was about to say something, but then shook his head. He looked over at the makeshift podium and small stage that the group had erected out of plywood and 2x4s. In the corner was a small boiler with a dizzying array of coils, wires, and pipes. A small amount of steam leaked from one of the fittings and the valves in line with the piping. Oh, a heater for this garage. Well, that's a good idea, Mark thought to himself. Why didn't I think of that? They all sat down in the back row, as there were only 3 rows given the small size of the garage. The first person to speak was one of the other Steam Angels, whom Mark didn't recognize. This man seemed intelligent and passionate, but Mark noted something about his impromptu speech. He really wasn't going anywhere. What's the main point of all this talk? Mark wondered to himself. First guy sat down after some light applause, and then Jared came to the platform. Well, thank you, Mr. Jones, for your thoughts and passion, Jared said. Let us know next week on your progress with that. At that exact moment, Lee Wei entered the room. Jared didn't miss a beat. Yes, yes. Here he is now, our senior Steam Angel, Lee Wei. Jared sat down in a chair next to the stage, and Lee Wei came to the podium. He looked around the room, saw everybody in attendance, and winked at Mark. Thank you all for attending tonight. I'm going to get right down to business, as I know everybody's busy and would like to get something out of the meeting. Here's what we know so far about the group calling themselves the Power Wolves. They're fairly organized, well-funded, and have decent skills and access to juice tech. All this makes them dangerous for inflicting their agenda on anybody who stands in their way. He paused, twisting his white mustache between his fingers as he contemplated his next thoughts. Lee really was tired of doing this sort of thing. He'd forgotten how many centuries ago he'd been doing this in Western Europe. Everybody then was too busy playing in the mud and beating themselves on the heads with Bibles. He chuckled at that thought. Oh yeah, I better continue my speech, he said after an awkward silence. We won't need our masks in here, but you can keep yours on if it makes you feel better. He already said a silent prayer for clearing the meeting room of any pathogens. Jared, what's our current estimate? Didn't you say we had counted about 15 of them? Jared nodded. That's about right, he said, but we're not 100% sure. Could be a few more, maybe a few less. So we can err on the side of caution and just say that there might be 18 to 20 of them, Lee calculated. We also know now the identity of the man who seems to be directing them from behind the scenes. He goes by the name of Mr. Melvin Blake. He has other financiers who we're sure he gets help from, but he's the main individual responsible from what we can tell. A chill went down Mark's spine, and his attention became razor-sharp at Lee's last words. Can it be? Can it be that asshole who used to own Coal Town Mines? Mark wondered incredulously. As if right on cue, Lee responded to Mark's thoughts. This man got his money from the coal industry and continues to this day to exploit the workers for his own personal benefit. He has no interest other than serving his own empire and gaining more power and influence over the political circles to advance his own personal agenda. There might be only one other person in attendance here tonight who's heard of this man, and his name is Mark McLeod. Mark was dumbfounded to hear his own name. Mark, can you stand up, please? Maybe you can tell us a little about this guy. Since I know from your background in Coal Town and talking with you, that you may have some valuable information to share with us. Please. Leeway gestured for Mark to come to the podium. Suddenly Mark realized he'd been set up. He looked over at Elroy. He was too busy laughing, with his hand over his mouth to say anything. You knew! Mark hissed. Elroy shrugged, pretending to be ignorant, but grinning from ear to ear. Mark sheepishly looked at the podium and took inventory of the room. They had caught him off guard, and he wasn't particularly good at speeches. One thing he was good at, though, was speaking from the heart. He'd have to rely on that skill now. Mark made his way to the podium and then turned to address the small group. Thanks, Lee. I think, he said tentatively. A couple of chuckles from the crowd manifested instantaneously. Mark's face showed a man caught off guard, but resolved to proceed. Seriously, though, this gentleman, Mr. Blake, if you can call him that, cares for nobody other than himself. I worked with him indirectly in Coal Town for several years before I moved here. He was basically the owner of several mines in upstate Pennsylvania, but I think by now he's gained several more. He's very well connected, very well funded, but doesn't like getting his own hands dirty. He very much likes to direct others from a distance so he can avoid being blamed for anything. There were several efforts to bring lawsuits against their company that were mysteriously dropped at the last minute. Now Mark was warming up to this topic, and the group was paying close attention to him. One of them even went to trial, he continued. Yep, he was ruled a mistrial due to a technicality. Go figure. There were several stories of families being poisoned from wastewater or toxic discharges into the river that couldn't be explained by anything else but the factories close up by there. And somehow this man and his company got away with murder, literally many times. He will look you in the eye and claim complete innocence, and then turn around and plot how to ruin you and not blink an eye. A total psychopath. I think that's the word. This man is even aware of the damage he's done to cities and communities and people spanning decades. He runs all his mines this way, which is why I couldn't stand working for him any longer. Nobody could ever win by standing up to him. When my marriage failed, I took it upon myself to start fresh and come here to get away from him. Apparently, I couldn't. Maybe there's a connection. Maybe there's some reason he and I both came here. Maybe there's some unresolved business, or maybe there's some justice to be had after all. I guess that's why I'm here tonight. Isn't that why we have these meetings for in the first place? Justice? Mark looked around the room as everybody nodded vigorously and started to mumble, chuckle, and talk amongst themselves. At that, Mark suddenly felt validated in a way that he hadn't been in a very long time. He looked at Lee Wei for some cue. All he got was a thumbs up and a big grin. Not the kind of encouragement he was looking for. He didn't want this. Not now. Then he thought of Mr. Snuggles and his kids. Something had to change. Mark stepped down from the podium and walked to Lee, who was standing over near the back door. Lee assessed Mark's energetic state at that moment and determined it was time for another lesson. He took Mark aside outside the garage door, away from the others, for a few moments to share some heartfelt wisdom. Rejection is not something that males enjoy experiencing or even want to experience. Few things can deflate a male ego or cause men to retreat into themselves more than rejection. It's hard to explain to many women this effect on men. Men see it from their perspective as teens, young adults growing up and dating when they're 18 and all that. There's something psychological about how males look at females. We're talking on an unconscious level, on a cultural level. Maybe it's just in Western culture. Or it's just a human being thing in general. You could consider it external validation. That's what part of it is. Males look for validation when they make a pass at a female and try to get a date or just to show their appreciation. There are a lot of guys who don't really know how to show their appreciation in life-affirming ways, but instead give cat calls, wolf whistles, and gestures. Those guys need to refine their approach, because any woman who would respond to that sort of thing is probably not great wife material. But everyone is different. What do I know about women? I'm really old. I'm talking about self-love here. The need for some kind of approval or validation of one's feelings, thoughts, life goals, or plans. Whatever it is that a guy sees in a woman as a long-term prospect. That's the kind of rejection I'm talking about. There are guys who go out there and deliberately try to trigger women, to play with them, to manipulate them, or just to sleep with them. I'm not talking about those guys. Those ones who get rejected get what's coming to them. That's just karma. What I'm talking about are legitimate, heartfelt, self-aware men who are trying to share their lives with potential counterparts. Women have their own issues and traumas, psychological luggage to get through, and reflections of each other's behavior and issues. A lot of people project their issues and insecurities onto each other, knowing or otherwise, and it can cause heartache because rejection can cause pain. Hurt people hurt others, plain and simple. Miscommunication is to be expected when two people try to come together. Almost all women have different standards of behavior and a different set of expectations for communication. When a prospective male tries to fantasize, rejection happens. Rejection can be justified if the guy is behaving or communicating in unacceptable ways. To most women, there are instances when rejection is unwarranted, or at least in a spiritual sense. All that being said, this is no joke. I know what it's like to be with a good woman, and I know what it's like to walk away from a painful situation. It's not easy, and it hurts. But more importantly, when it comes to finding new love with a good woman or a good man, the good ones can wait, or will wait. They'll wait because they'll know that you need to heal and that they need to know that you're worth it. And they know that you're worth it. You should know that you're worth it. I know you're recovering from a divorce right now. Believe me, I know how you feel. The first several months of my separation sucked royally for me, but that was a long time ago. There is no way around it, depending on the quality of your marriage prior to separation. Some people are in an abusive situation that they can't wait to get out of. They're thrilled to finally leave. Someone who was in an abusive relationship may have been physically threatened, but it's also liberating and amazing for them to break free of the situation. I applaud them for doing so. My situation was gray. It wasn't cut and dried. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something that happened overnight. It takes years of neglect, resentment, and excessive busyness with chasing the kids and not nurturing each other for a couple to get to where I was with my ex-wife. It wasn't uncommon for people my age or at my place in life to get there and spend so much time and energy on the kids, or just making money to pay the bills, that they lost perspective on what matters the most. In the grand scheme of things, the kids are temporary, but they're extremely important. Your spouse is supposed to be somebody who sticks with you to the end, but at what point is that threshold hit? At what point is that threshold crossed where you make the determination that not only is the flame out, but one or both spouses didn't even realize that they took each other for granted? This enables the dysfunction to fester for years. At least one was suffering in silence and the other one oblivious to it. In the months leading up to my separation, I was bawling my eyes out almost daily. She had no clue that we were so busy running around at the time that we couldn't be present for each other. Date night was something that other people did. It took a lot of neglect to get to that point where I checked out of the relationship. I didn't really want anybody else right away because I knew I needed to heal and have some alone time to pray and to meditate. It's hard though, especially when there's children involved. Custody is an extra layer that separated couples have to deal with. I had no desire to ever talk to her until I knew I felt better. And alright, I think that's good for now. Lee paused after his long monologue to gauge Mark's mood. He felt an overwhelming energy of sadness and regret from Mark. Lee gestured for the door while somebody else was taking the podium. Mark and Lee were standing right outside the back door, where smokers usually hang out. Lucky for them, the air was clear and mostly quiet that night. Mark, the trials and tribulations of all souls occur in a person's life when they're supposed to, Lee explained. The life lessons required are customized for each person. What's your message, Mark? What's your light that you most desire to share with the world? There's so many souls here that are just plain lost. They have no idea why they're here or what they're doing, and they're just delusional or spiritually deprived. Many think they're here just to be entertained, just to go through life and eat, drink, and be merry. Those are certainly fun things to do. However, this planet is an elite school for the soul. We're all beings of light, and we're receiving divine messages from above. It's up to us, aware folks, to transform them into a format that the people here can understand. The Steam Angels provide that forum for open discussion of just what that light might look like. It's up to you to determine how you fit into this. Like I said, Earth is an elite school for the soul. Some people's message is against slavery. For others, it might be advocacy for homeless veterans or against child trafficking. Perhaps it's feeding the poor or tending to the sick that breaks your heart. Do you know what that is for you, Mark? Lee looked at Mark. Mark was nodding and taking it in, but he wasn't ready for the pause, and his mind had already wandered again. He cursed himself for missing half of what Lee had just said. Something about my mission and passion, Mark finally said. I hear what you're saying, and don't get me wrong. These words sound good to me. I thought this was where you came in. Can't you just tell me? Mark asked. That's not how it works here. Part of the mission you have here is to figure out what your mission is. You're being called to serve in this spiritual war right now. You have a choice to make. You can believe what you want to believe and reject what you want to reject, but you have to choose regardless. You can't keep sitting on the fence, indecisively unsure about where you wish to spend your time and energy. I can't tell you what your mission is, but I can point you in the right direction. But then you have to figure it out. Whatever things you're passionate about are good candidates. Those missions that resonate strongly in your heart. That space felt there manifests in the form of tears and passion when the injustices or whatever perceived situation meant is. It manifests as dysfunction that needs to be healed for the collective that you feel you can help. That's why you're here. That's your mission. Focus on that as your primary lesson. Most of the lessons you have set out for yourself in this lifetime are directly or indirectly related to this. You'll quickly find out that as you realize what your purpose is, many of your sets of skills, situations, lessons, and talents magically align with this mission. It's why you happen to be awesome with tools and troubleshooting. You're great with your hands and you're strong. You're focused and you know how to fix things or build things intuitively. Lee remarked with a slight pause. Mark was taking it in like an eager student making notes. He silently wondered where Lee got all this profound wisdom. Maybe he was more experienced than his appearance seemed. He looked at Lee to continue. Your passion might just be being a fix-it man, and you're great at that. But for some odd reason, you've been unable to find a job that pays enough, and that makes you upset. So you lack confidence and entrepreneurial skills to go into business for yourself. Maybe your path will require you to create that which you wanted to see in the world, but never saw anyone ever make or offer before. Each person's greatness is unique to them. So you take the safe route, and you work for somebody else, but your heart yearns to be that freelance handyman or inventor. So the question I have for you is this. What breaks your heart? What sort of things in this world make you the most passionate, the most energized, and the most upset? Find out what you feel the world is lacking, and find a way for that service to help. This is the area you need to focus on. It might not be something you considered before, but ultimately, you have to do some introspection here. Does that answer your question? Lee finally asked Mark. I hate it when you do that, Mark blurted out in a respectful way, grinning. When I do what? Lee began to smile. He noticed what he was doing. Answer my questions with more questions. It drives me bonkers. Lee put his hands together and bowed slightly towards Mark. He gestured to the door. Apparently, today's lesson was over. Gestured to the door. And that concludes today's excerpt. As you can tell, I get a little choked up reading this particular passage as well. All of us are here for a reason. Are there not? we know what it is. There are people that can help point us in the right direction. But ultimately, we have to do the work. You're not going to find the answers on Netflix or YouTube or some dude selling a course online. Although, there might be a guy selling a course online on how to find out what your purpose is. I can think of a couple. However, you have to do the work. It's up to each and every one of us to find out what lights our heart on fire and inspires us. Whatever it is, it's our own greatness, our own path, our own journey, our own passion. I thank you all for listening tonight. I get passionate just talking about this stuff. And I look forward to more interactions in the future with the public. My future fan base, which has yet to manifest, but I am acting in faith, knowing full well that God has big plans for me. And someday, the Epic Lamplighters will be real. They'll come to shows and events, and people will see our logo. And they go, yeah, these guys are good. We've already begun. The rudiments are in place, and the work behind the scenes is already happening. It's going to be real. It's up to each and one of us to make our dreams become real, to get with the people that we know can help us, to find our tribe, and to do the work. I know you can do it. Ask for help if you need some. Love you all. Thank you for coming. And once again, book release party comes on October 24th. Eventbrite tickets and link will be on the website, epiclamplighters.com. And the book, Love Letters to the Postman, this is what the cover looks like. Already available on Amazon, a paperback, Kindle. So I hope you enjoyed this tonight. It's about 468 pages of awesomeness.